Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." When it comes to love and trust, the unconscious reveals itself in ways we often overlook. Have you ever felt a shift in someone close, yet silenced your intuition? Today, I invite you to listen deeply to the signs, to yourself, and to the truths you can no longer afford to ignore. The Carl Jung once said that the psyche cannot lie indefinitely, because what is hidden in the unconscious eventually seeps into behavior, tone, and presence. When we speak of the psychological signs of cheating, the first and most telling place we must look is at the behavioral changes that quietly surface. These changes often arrive like whispers rather than thunderclaps. A partner who once seemed present and attentive may now appear distracted, withdrawn, or strangely restless. Jung taught that our outer life is often a mirror of our inner conflicts, and when someone is entangled in infidelity, their unconscious begins to create dissonance that cannot be entirely concealed. To understand this, it is important to see how the human psyche balances between what Jung called the persona, the mask we show to the world, and the shadow, the hidden aspects of self we repress. The cheater's persona may insist on appearing faithful, loyal, and committed, but the shadow carries the secret desire, the guilt, and the hidden truth. The struggle between persona and shadow inevitably leaks into behavior. This is why a person's rhythms suddenly change. Their speech may sound forced. Their body language may betray unease, or their patterns of intimacy may shift without clear reason. These are not simply habits changing at random. They are the unconscious revealing itself through cracks in the persona. Behavioral changes in cheaters' psychology often include secrecy, defensiveness, or overcompensation. Jung would remind us that the psyche, when hiding something, becomes defensive because the ego fears discovery. Small acts, such as guarding one's phone, changing daily routines, or becoming unusually protective of privacy, are not only practical strategies but also psychological defenses. The unconscious feels the weight of guilt or duplicity and creates a kind of hyper-vigilance in the individual. A woman or man who once shared openly now hides, not simply to avoid being caught, but because their inner life has become divided, and that division manifests outwardly. Another common sign is emotional withdrawal. Jung believed that energy in the psyche is finite. When emotional energy is being invested in secrecy and in another relationship, less is available for the primary partnership. This explains why partners who are unfaithful often seem detached, less affectionate, or emotionally unavailable. They are not only withholding love, but are unconsciously redirecting psychic energy elsewhere. From a Jungian view, this is a displacement of libido, the psychic energy that fuels desire, creativity, and connection. Where the libido flows, attention follows, and where it is withdrawn, a void is left. The betrayed partner often senses this void before they can articulate it, feeling an absence that words cannot fully describe. Jung's perspective also invites us to look at overcompensation as a behavioral sign. Sometimes, rather than withdrawing, the unfaithful partner becomes excessively attentive or unusually generous. This is the psyche's attempt to balance guilt with apparent devotion. Yet, such behavior often feels exaggerated, lacking the natural ease it once carried. Jung would say that this is a manifestation of the unconscious shadow attempting to conceal itself by leaning too heavily into the persona. The good partner mask becomes overly polished, and it is precisely in that perfection that the falseness is revealed. Behavioral changes are also visible in communication, sudden irritability, defensiveness, or even gaslighting, where the unfaithful partner accuses the other of being paranoid or overly suspicious, are psychological maneuvers to protect the fragile secret. Jung understood projection as one of the key ways the unconscious operates. The cheater may project their own guilt or inner conflict onto their partner, accusing them of distrust or unfaithfulness, when in truth these qualities are alive within themselves. This projection not only diverts suspicion, but also momentarily relieves the cheater of their own inner burden, shifting it onto the other. From an educational standpoint, noticing these signs requires a balance of intuition and observation. Jung placed great value on the wisdom of the unconscious, which often communicates through feelings, hunches, or subtle impressions. Many betrayed partners report that they just knew something was wrong long before they had tangible proof. This knowing is not irrational paranoia. It is the psyche's ability to perceive the dissonance between persona and shadow in the other. What appears as small inconsistencies, unexplained absences, a sudden change in grooming, a new defensiveness about trivial matters, are the unconscious breaking through the facade. Yet, it is important to remember Jung's caution. To interpret these signs is not to leap to accusation, but to understand the deeper psychological truth. Behavioral changes may indeed point to infidelity, but they always point to a conflict within the psyche. Whether or not cheating is occurring, such shifts demand attention, because they signify that something in the unconscious is pressing for recognition. For Jung, the psyche longs for wholeness, and deception creates fragmentation. The visible signs are simply the surface ripples of an inner division. Therefore, the educational value of recognizing behavioral changes in cheater psychology is twofold. On the one hand, it protects us from ignoring the obvious, from dismissing our intuition, or from denying the subtle truths revealed through behavior. On the other hand, it invites us to see these signs not just as proof of betrayal, but as manifestations of deeper psychological patterns. The struggle between persona and shadow, the displacement of psychic energy, and the projections of guilt. Jung would urge us not only to see the surface, but to look beneath, to understand what archetypal forces are at play, and to recognize the unconscious dialogue hidden in everyday actions. In the end, behavioral changes are more than habits. They are revelations. They are the unconscious whispering truths that the conscious mind wishes to conceal. By learning to see them, we are not only safeguarding trust, but also honoring the deeper psychological reality that Jung devoted his life to unveiling, that what is hidden in the unconscious will always, inevitably, make itself known. Carl Jung often reminded us that human behavior cannot be explained only by surface-level motives. To understand why people act as they do, we must look beneath the visible, into the unconscious, where hidden forces shape choices and relationships. When it comes to infidelity, the question of why people cheat psychology cannot be answered simply by saying they are unhappy or tempted. Jung's approach shows us that cheating often arises from unconscious motives, from the shadow self, from repressed desires, and from aspects of the psyche that have not been integrated into consciousness. In this way, infidelity is not only an act against another, but a symptom of an inner conflict. Jung's concept of the shadow is particularly important here. The shadow is the part of the psyche that contains what we deny, repress, or cannot yet face in ourselves. It carries both the unacceptable traits we reject and the unlived potential we have not yet embraced. When someone engages in cheating, it often reflects the shadow-seeking expression. They may present themselves consciously as loyal, responsible, and loving, yet unconsciously they harbor desires, frustrations, or needs that they have never fully admitted to themselves. The act of infidelity, then, becomes the shadow's way of breaking through the persona, the mask we wear for the world, and forcing itself into expression. Jung would say that what is not made conscious will be lived out as fate, and cheating is one such manifestation of unacknowledged shadow forces. This shadow dynamic explains why many individuals who cheat are not necessarily dissatisfied with their primary relationship in the obvious sense. They may even claim to love their partner deeply. The cheating, then, is not about replacing one relationship with another, but about seeking contact with the disowned parts of themselves. For instance, a person who has lived dutifully, responsibly, and predictably may repress their own spontaneity, passion, or even rebelliousness. When the shadow grows too heavy with these unlived qualities, it seeks release, often in the form of secret affairs. Jung would frame this not merely as betrayal, but as a distorted attempt at individuation, the process of becoming whole, though carried out unconsciously and destructively. Another layer to these unconscious motives is projection. Jung described projection as the process by which we attribute our own disowned qualities onto others. In the case of infidelity, a man or woman might project their own inner unlived aspects onto a new partner. The attraction is often less about the individual and more about what they symbolize: freedom, adventure, passion, or vitality that has been denied in the self. The new partner becomes a mirror of the cheater's hidden desires. This explains why many affairs seem irrational from the outside. The unconscious is not concerned with rationality, It seeks symbols that awaken what has been buried. The attraction is archetypal, not logical, and the cheater is often captivated by what the other represents rather than who they truly are. From a Jungian lens, cheating can also be seen as a conflict between the persona and the true self. The persona demands that one live up to social expectations, being the faithful spouse, the reliable partner, the good parent. These roles, while necessary, can become oppressive if they dominate the whole personality. If an individual identifies too strongly with the persona, they lose contact with their deeper self, and the shadow grows in strength. Infidelity, then, can emerge as the psyche's rebellion against a life that feels overly confined by roles and expectations. Jung's insight here is profound. When we do not consciously integrate all aspects of ourselves, the repressed elements will find their way into action, often destructively. Cheating becomes a symptom of this psychic imbalance. It is also important to consider that unconscious motives behind cheating may relate to unresolved complexes from childhood. Jung explained that complexes are emotionally charged clusters of ideas and memories that influence behavior unconsciously. A person who grew up feeling unseen, neglected, or unworthy may unconsciously seek validation through affairs, not because they do not value their partner, but because the old wound continues to seek healing. The act of cheating, in this sense, is an unconscious attempt to fill a void left long ago. Yet, as Jung would point out, the unconscious cannot be satisfied through repetition of old patterns. Until the root complex is acknowledged and worked through, the behavior will only perpetuate suffering. From an educational perspective, the key lesson here is that cheating is rarely just about desire for another person. It is about desire for the hidden self. Jung would encourage us to look beyond the surface of betrayal to see the deeper psychological truth. Infidelity reveals where integration has failed, where the shadow has grown too heavy, and where the unconscious is forcing itself into awareness. This does not excuse the harm caused by cheating, but it does explain why it happens so frequently, even among those who consciously wish to remain faithful. To truly understand the unconscious motives behind cheating, we must ask what part of the self is seeking expression here. What has been denied, repressed, or unlived? Jung would say that every act of betrayal, painful as it is, points to a deeper longing for wholeness. The tragedy is that the longing is pursued through destruction rather than integration. Instead of consciously engaging with the shadow, the individual acts it out in ways that harm themselves and others. Ultimately, Jung's teaching offers both a warning and a path forward. The warning is that when we refuse to face our shadow, it will express itself through fate, often in painful ways such as betrayal. The path forward is to bring these unconscious motives into awareness, to acknowledge the shadow, and to integrate its energies consciously. By doing so, we prevent the destructive cycle of unconscious repetition. The unconscious will always seek expression, but through shadow work, reflection, and individuation, that expression can become creative rather than destructive. Thus, Jung helps us see that the psychology of infidelity is not simply about weak willpower or fleeting attraction. It is about the deeper forces of the psyche striving to be seen. Cheating reveals what has been buried, and only by acknowledging those hidden motives can true transformation begin. Carl Jung often observed that the unconscious does not merely speak through dreams or symbols, but through the smallest gestures, the tone of a voice, and the movements of the body. When we look at the psychological signs of cheating, one of the most telling arenas is not the spoken word but body language, the unspoken language of the psyche. While a person may carefully choose their words, the body often reveals what the conscious mind is trying to conceal. This is why, in the study of cheating partner body language psychology, one must pay close attention not only to what is said, but to the silences, the hesitations, and the inconsistencies between speech and gesture. Jung would remind us that when the conscious mind resists truth, the unconscious will still find its way to express it, often through nonverbal cues. Consider how Jung described the persona, the social mask we wear to fit expectations. When someone is hiding infidelity, their persona insists on presenting them as faithful, committed, and trustworthy. But the shadow, the hidden self containing their guilt, fear, and secret desires, presses against this mask. The body becomes the battleground between persona and shadow. This tension reveals itself through gestures such as avoiding eye contact, sudden stiffness in posture, or changes in tone when certain topics arise. For example, when questioned about their whereabouts, a person may over-explain, laugh nervously, or shift their gaze. These signs are not random. They are the unconscious attempting to balance the weight of the concealed truth. Jung believed that repression creates psychic tension, and that tension must leak out somewhere. When a partner is hiding betrayal, their unconscious often betrays them through inconsistency. One moment, they may appear overly affectionate, as if to reassure or compensate. The next, they may retreat into coldness or irritability. These oscillations are not merely mood swings, but reflect the psyche struggling to reconcile conflicting realities. The desire to maintain the relationship and the simultaneous involvement in deception. The body, unable to fully align with the conscious narrative, exposes the truth through these fluctuations. Another important aspect of body language is the phenomenon of micro-expressions. Fleeting facial expressions that reveal genuine emotion before the mask of the persona can be reasserted. While Jung did not use modern psychological terms like micro-expressions, his theories on the unconscious align closely with this concept. A partner who insists they are faithful may, for a split second, display fear, guilt, or discomfort when confronted. These moments pass quickly, but they are the psyche revealing itself before the conscious mind regains control. To Jung, these slips are not accidents, but necessary releases of psychic tension. The unconscious always seeks expression, and it cannot be completely silenced. Jung also wrote about projection as a key psychological process. In the context of cheating, projection can be seen in body language as well. A person hiding infidelity may accuse their partner of being suspicious or paranoid, while their own defensive posture, crossed arms, or heightened agitation reveals their inner guilt. This is the unconscious mechanism of shifting one's own burden onto another. The body, even as it deflects blame, displays the unresolved tension of the hidden truth. Thus, projection and body language intertwine, offering clues that the conscious story does not align with the unconscious reality. The symbolism of physical distance is another telling sign. Jung emphasized that symbols often reveal themselves in outer reality as reflections of inner states. When a partner suddenly creates physical distance, sitting farther away, turning the body slightly, avoiding touch, it often symbolizes the emotional distance that has already formed internally. Conversely, a sudden increase in physical contact may also signal guilt, a compensatory act to cover the inner disconnection. These gestures are symbolic acts, unconscious attempts to balance the fractured integrity of the relationship. It is also worth noting that some signs manifest in speech patterns rather than posture alone. Jung often spoke about slips of the tongue, or Freudian slips, as moments when the unconscious breaks through language. In the context of cheating, this may look like a partner using unusual phrases, hesitating, or even accidentally mentioning the name of the person involved. While the conscious mind scrambles to repair the mistake, the unconscious has already spoken. These slips are not coincidental. They are another reminder of Jung's insight that the unconscious cannot be fully suppressed. From an educational standpoint, the value in studying body language lies not in turning relationships into constant suspicion, but in learning to recognize the deeper dialogue between conscious intention and unconscious expression. Jung would caution us against interpreting one sign in isolation, as the psyche is complex and human behavior is multifaceted. Instead, he would encourage us to look for patterns, repeated inconsistencies, recurring nervous gestures, or a prolonged dissonance between words and actions. It is in these patterns that the truth of the unconscious emerges most clearly. The important lesson here is that the body is a language of the unconscious. Just as dreams use symbols to communicate what the ego resists, so too does body language reveal hidden truths through posture, gesture, and tone. When someone is unfaithful, their unconscious conflict is too great to remain perfectly hidden. The split between persona and shadow, between the life they claim to live and the life they secretly inhabit, creates fissures in their presentation. These fissures show up in their body language, their silences, and the way they move through the world. For Jung, these signs are not merely clues to betrayal, but evidence of the deeper principle that the unconscious will always seek expression. Cheating, in this sense, is not only a relational wound but a psychological drama in which the persona struggles to maintain control while the shadow pushes for recognition. Body language is the stage upon which this drama plays out. By learning to read it, we gain insight not only into the presence of infidelity, but into the deeper dynamics of the human psyche. The eternal struggle between what we wish to present to the world and what we cannot deny within ourselves. Carl Jung taught that when we betray others, we inevitably betray ourselves, because every action carries psychological consequences that echo within the unconscious. When we speak about cheating, it is easy to view it only in relational terms, one person breaking trust with another. But from a Jungian perspective, the consequences of infidelity run far deeper. Trust issues and infidelity psychology reveal that cheating fragments not only the bond between two people, but also the psyche of the one who betrays. To deceive another is to live a divided life, and the unconscious cannot bear such division without seeking resolution. Jung emphasized that the psyche strives for wholeness, a state he called individuation, in which the conscious and unconscious are brought into balance. Cheating disrupts this process because it forces the individual to live in contradiction. The persona insists on loyalty and honesty, while the shadow harbors secrecy, guilt, and hidden desires. This split creates a psychic wound. The cheater must constantly reconcile two realities, the life they live openly and the life they hide. Such fragmentation inevitably leaks into behavior, mood, and even physical health, because the unconscious cannot indefinitely sustain deception without producing symptoms. The partner who has been betrayed also experiences profound psychological consequences. Jung's work on complexes offers an important framework here. Infidelity often activates old wounds and unresolved complexes, particularly around self-worth, abandonment, and rejection. A woman or man who has been cheated on may not only grieve the present betrayal, but also relive childhood wounds where trust and security were compromised. The pain is magnified because the unconscious links the present hurt to earlier experiences, weaving them into a larger narrative of betrayal. Jung would explain that this is why infidelity often feels shattering. It is not only about the current relationship, but about the entire history of the psyche's wounds being stirred. The unconscious also reacts to cheating through projection. For the betrayed, projection often takes the form of seeing themselves as unworthy, inadequate, or somehow responsible for the betrayal. This is a distortion created by the unconscious, which tries to make sense of pain by internalizing blame. For the cheater, projection might mean attributing their restlessness, guilt, or dissatisfaction to their partner, accusing them of being controlling, inattentive, or unloving. These projections serve as defenses, but they deepen the fracture, pushing both partners farther from the truth. Jung would remind us that projection blinds us to our own reality, and only by withdrawing these projections can authentic healing begin. Another critical layer is the impact of attachment styles, which modern psychology links to relational patterns, but which Jung anticipated in his insights about archetypes and early experiences. Those with anxious attachment may find the wound of betrayal almost unbearable, as it confirms their deepest, unconscious fear of abandonment. Those with avoidant patterns may retreat further into detachment, using the betrayal as justification for their belief that intimacy is dangerous. In both cases, cheating amplifies the pre-existing patterns of the psyche, making it more difficult to see reality clearly. Jung would encourage us to view these reactions not as weaknesses, but as opportunities to confront the unconscious scripts we live by. Cheating also affects the collective dimension of the psyche. Jung described how individuals are influenced not only by their personal unconscious, but also by the collective unconscious, which contains archetypal patterns. Infidelity often awakens the archetype of betrayal, symbolized in myths and stories across cultures. The betrayed partner may feel not just personal hurt, but as though they are living out an ancient drama of trust broken and innocence lost. The cheater, too, may feel overwhelmed by guilt, not only because of personal actions, but because they have stepped into a symbolic role of deceiver, one that carries universal weight. This is why the pain of infidelity feels so archetypal, so timeless, as though one is caught in a myth as old as humanity itself. Jung believed that every crisis holds within it the possibility of transformation. While infidelity fractures trust, it also exposes what has been hidden. For the cheater, the act reveals unmet needs, shadow desires, or repressed aspects of the self that demand recognition. For the betrayed, the pain forces confrontation with complexes, projections, and unconscious fears. Both are offered the possibility, though painful, of individuation. The betrayal becomes a mirror, reflecting what has long been unconscious and offering the chance to bring it into awareness. But this possibility can only be realized if both partners are willing to face the truth rather than retreat into denial, blame, or avoidance. Educationally, the key lesson in studying how cheating affects the unconscious is that betrayal is not simply a moral failure, but a psychological event with profound consequences. It shatters illusions, disrupts psychic balance, and forces the unconscious to the surface. The trust that is broken is not only between two people, but within the individual, who betrays their own values and fragments their own psyche. Healing requires far more than apologies or surface-level repairs. It requires the hard work of integrating the shadow, withdrawing projections, and rebuilding trust not only with another person, but within the self. Carl Jung would argue that the true danger of cheating lies not only in the act itself, but in what happens if its psychological meaning is ignored. If the unconscious forces that drove the betrayal remain unacknowledged, they will continue to manifest, perhaps through repeated infidelity, chronic dissatisfaction, or the erosion of intimacy. But if these forces are confronted, understood, and integrated, the betrayal can paradoxically become a path toward greater wholeness. The cheater learns to face the shadow without acting it out destructively, and the betrayed learns to confront old wounds and reclaim their own strength. Thus, Jung's insights show us that cheating is not merely an external rupture, but an inner drama, one that unfolds in the depths of the unconscious. To betray is to fragment the psyche. To be betrayed is to confront the shadow of trust. Both partners stand at a crossroads, to deny the unconscious and remain trapped in repetition, or to face it and allow individuation to take root. The unconscious will always seek expression, Jung tells us, and in the painful aftermath of infidelity, it calls out for nothing less than transformation. Carl Jung taught that what we do not make conscious appears in our lives as fate. In the study of cheating and infidelity, this truth could not be clearer. The behavioral shifts, the unconscious motives, the slips of body language, and the deep wounds of broken trust are not random events. They are the psyche speaking through action, revealing what the ego has tried to conceal. The 14 psychological signs of cheating are not merely warnings of betrayal in relationships. They are lessons in how the unconscious shapes our lives. Cheating is never just about secrecy between two people. It is about the fracture between persona and shadow, about repressed desires demanding expression, about projections and complexes seeking resolution. To betray another is also to betray oneself, to live divided, and the unconscious will always insist on wholeness. The conclusion we must draw is not one of despair, but of awareness. Infidelity shows us the cost of ignoring the shadow, the danger of repression, and the inevitability of the unconscious breaking through. But it also offers an opportunity, the chance to bring what is hidden into the light, to withdraw our projections, to confront the patterns that bind us, and to choose individuation, the path to psychological wholeness. Jung's wisdom reminds us that relationships are not just bonds between two people, but mirrors of the inner self. When we recognize the signs, when we listen to what the unconscious is telling us, we are no longer blind victims of fate. We step into responsibility, we learn, and we grow. In this way, even betrayal can become a teacher, guiding us toward deeper honesty, greater intimacy, and the profound freedom of living a life aligned with the truth of the soul.